The echoes of the Old West, a saga of survival and struggle. A man walks into a saloon carrying a sack full of gold. A week later, he vanishes without a trace. A stagecoach sets out at dawn, its passengers laughing under the rising sun. By nightfall, it has disappeared into the endless plains. A lone gunslinger stands on a hill, waiting for riders who will never come. The Wild West was more than just shootouts and sheriffs. It was a land of mystery, where entire towns could vanish, where warriors sang their final songs before the end, where legends were written in blood and dust. Beyond the famous outlaws and lawmen, countless stories remain buried beneath the prairie wind's tales of survival, betrayal, and battles long forgotten. Hold on tight, this ride is about to begin. If you love uncovering the forgotten stories of the Wild West, make sure to subscribe and join us on this journey into history. The Death Song of One-Eyed Antelope, 1819. The late summer sun burned over Wyoming as 32 Cheyenne warriors rode home from an alliance meeting with the Arapaho. On a ridge, a lone Crow scout watched them. He turned and fled, but an arrow caught him mid-stride. His body tumbled down the slope, his warning cry swallowed by the wind. Too late. The hills erupted with war cries. Hundreds of Crow warriors descended like a storm. The Cheyenne scrambled for cover, outnumbered and surrounded. They found refuge atop a rocky outcrop, firing their last bullets as arrows whistled through the air. One by one, they fell. Only One-Eyed Antelope remained, his body painted in blood and dust. He stood tall, raised his arms to the sky, and sang. The Crow hesitated for a moment. He was more than a man. Then, the arrows struck. When the battle ended, silence settled over the ridge. The Crow warriors gathered, staring at the lifeless figure who had defied them till the end. They did not take his scalp. Some said his spirit still roamed the wind, singing the death song of a warrior who never surrendered. The Bowstring Society Massacre, 1869. The Bowstring Society, an elite Dakota warrior band, camped near White Earth, unaware that shadows lurked beyond the trees. The U.S. Army and local militias had tracked them for days. As dawn neared, rifles clicked into position. The first shots tore through the stillness. The Dakota warriors leaped up, reaching for weapons that were just out of grasp. Gunfire drowned out war cries. Some tried to escape into the woods, but no mercy was given. When the sun rose, the feared Bowstring Society was no more silent figures left behind as a warning. Porcupine Bear's Revenge, 1838. Revenge came with the silence of ghosts. 2 years after the massacre, Porcupine Bear, a Cheyenne dog soldier, led 200 warriors into the heart of Kiowa land. The village slept beneath a sky heavy with stars, unaware of the shadows slipping between the teepees. Then chaos. Knives flashed, war clubs fell, screams rose into the night. By sunrise, the earth reeked of smoke and blood. Over 40 Kiowa lay still, their homes reduced to embers curling against the wind. The Cheyenne rode away victorious, but the land held on to the echoes of that morning. The blood feud had been answered, but it was far from over. The Battle of Belly River, 1870. The Cree marched with purpose over 500 warriors, believing this would be their final strike against the Blackfoot. They moved like a storm, confident that victory was near. But the Blackfoot had been watching. Instead of bracing for impact, they turned the river into a killing ground. As the first Cree warriors waded into the water, hidden Blackfoot fighters unleashed hell from the cliffs above. Muskets thundered, arrows rained down, and men tumbled into the freezing depths. Their war cries drowned beneath the current. By dusk, 300 Cree lay lifeless along the riverbank, the last great intertribal battle in Canadian history. Sitting Bull's first fight, 1850. Before he became a legend, Sitting Bull was just Jumping Badger, a 14-year-old boy, proving his worth. Deep in Crow territory, the Lakota planned a swift horse raid, but the night turned to blood. Amid the chaos, a Crow warrior charged at his uncle. Without hesitation, Jumping Badger raised his bow. The arrow flew straight, finding its mark. The enemy crumpled, lifeless, before he hit the earth. When the warriors returned home, the boy was no more. In his place stood Tatanka Iotake Sitting Bull, 6 Crazy Horse, at Little Bighorn, 1876. As Reno's cavalry charged the Lakota village, women and children scattered. The warriors did not. Among them stood Crazy Horse, watching, waiting stone still amid the storm. Then the eagle-bone whistle shrieked. He surged forward, and the warriors followed. The soldiers hesitated just a breath, just a moment. It was enough. The Lakota and Cheyenne crashed into them, steel against flesh, turning the Little Bighorn into a burial ground. History would call it Custer's last stand. The Battle of Tongue River, 1820. The Cheyenne raiders fled, their horses struggling through the deep snow, their breath rising in white clouds. Behind them, the Crow rode in silence, relentless, patient, waiting for the kill. At the frozen banks of the Tongue River, the Cheyenne had nowhere left to run. Then came the war cries. Spears found flesh, war clubs shattered bone, and arrows turned the falling snow crimson. The river, once frozen and still, was now broken by bodies sinking beneath its ice. When the last echoes of battle faded, only the Crow remained. That winter, the Cheyenne learned a hard truth on the plains. The strong endure, but the hunted do not escape. The Klamath Lake Massacre, 1846. John C. Fremont's men, weary from the road, made a fatal mistake. They camped without a guard. In the silent woods, Klamath warriors watched, waiting. Then, the first arrow struck. A heartbeat later, the night exploded in chaos. Spears found their marks, knives flashed in firelight, and men fell before they could reach their rifles. Kit Carson fought his way free, his breath ragged, his hands slick with blood. By dawn, the snow was trampled in red, the ground littered with the fallen. The Klamath had spoken. No trespasser would leave their land unscathed. The Rescue of the Donner Party, 1847. The rescuers found only silence. Snowdrifts buried the cabins, the fires long dead. Inside, the air was heavy with the stench of death. Then they saw them, bones, stripped clean, scattered across the frozen ground. A starving woman, her voice barely a whisper, asked, "Are you men from California or from heaven?" But there was no salvation here, only horror. When the snow finally melted, one man remained, Louis Kieseberg. He swore he had not eaten the dead. No one believed him. The Mojave Massacre, 1827. Jedediah Smith and his men followed the Colorado River. Their thoughts on trade and survival, not the vengeance that stalked them. But the Mojave had not forgotten past bloodshed. As the trappers waded into the shallows, the air split with war cries. Arrows and clubs struck before rifles could be raised. The river turned red, carrying lifeless bodies downstream, silent, unmarked graves beneath the merciless desert sun. The Umpqua Massacre, 1828. Jedediah Smith had survived grizzlies, deserts, and war, but Umpqua territory was his undoing. Whispers in the dark, uneasy glances. Then, without warning, spears flashing, war cries shattering the night, his men fell in moments. Smith barely escaped, vanishing into the wilderness. He never returned. The killing of Jedediah Smith, 1831. Alone on the Cimarron route, Smith saw dust rising Comanche riders. He raised a hand in peace. An arrow struck his shoulder. He fired, but the spears came too fast. The desert swallowed him whole. His body was never found. Cold-blooded murder in Alta California, 1846. June, 1846. Near San Francisco Bay, Fremont's men seized 3 unarmed Californios. Kit Carson hesitated. Prisoners? Fremont's answer was cold. I don't need prisoners. 3 shots. 3 bodies in the dust. The bay remained silent. The Bloody Benders, 1873. A warm meal, a friendly smile. That's how the Bender family lured travelers in Kansas. Kate charmed them. Pa waited behind a curtain. A hammer to the skull, then the knife. When Dr. York vanished, a blood-soaked pit was found. The Benders were gone, lost to the wind. The Fetterman Massacre, 1866. Fetterman scoffed. With my 80 men, I could ride through the entire Sioux Nation. A small war party taunted his troops, luring them over a ridge straight into 1,500 warriors. War cries rang out. Arrows, spears, gunfire. Within minutes, Fetterman and his men lay dead. Not one survived. The legacy of the Old West. The Old West was a land of contradictions, of beauty and brutality, of triumph and tragedy. Its stories, though often forgotten, continue to resonate, offering lessons and insights into the human experience. The echoes of the Old West remind us that history is not a simple narrative, but a complex tapestry woven from the threads of countless lives. And in those echoes, we find the enduring spirit of the frontier, a spirit of resilience, defiance, and hope.